Nephilim. The Nephilim are mysterious beings who appear in Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 through 4 and Numbers chapter 13 verse 33, often interpreted as a race of giants and a symbol of primordial chaos. In Genesis, they were born from the union between the sons of God and the daughters of men. The phrase sons of God in Hebrew, Bnei ha-Elohim, is interpreted by some early Jewish and Christian traditions as fallen angels. Compare 1 Enoch chapter 6 through 7 and 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4, who breached celestial boundaries and produced hybrid offspring of extraordinary power. The name Nephilim comes from the Hebrew root means to fall, thus meaning the fallen ones or those who cause others to fall. In Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, the Israelite spies claimed to have seen the Nephilim in the land of Canaan and felt like grasshoppers in their presence, an indication that they were immensely large and terrifying. Their existence is often linked to the moral corruption so severe that God decided to destroy the world with the Great Flood. Although their historical existence cannot be verified, the narrative's influence is immense. The Nephilim also feature extensively in non-canonical texts like the Book of Enoch, which portrays them as predators of humanity and destroyers of the earth. In popular culture, they are often associated with ancient giants, alien races, or supernatural creatures. In short, the Nephilim represent a forbidden mixture of the celestial and human realms, resulting in great chaos and serving as a warning against violating divine order. Rephaim. The Rephaim were an ancient group of giants mentioned in various parts of the Bible, notably in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 11, Genesis chapter 14, verse 5, and Joshua chapter 12, verse 4, as the original inhabitants of the region of Canaan and its surroundings before the arrival of the Israelites. They are described as beings of extraordinary size and strength, often associated with fear and supernatural power. One of the most famous figures of the Rephaim is Og, king of Bashan, who is said to sleep on an iron bed 9 cubits long, about 13 feet, a detail that emphasizes his immense size and physical prowess. Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 11. The name Rephaim also appears in the context of the realm of the dead, Sheol, implying they may have also been regarded as ancestral spirits or shadowy entities after death. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 9, and Psalm chapter 88, verse 10. In ancient texts like the Ugaritic Baal cycle, a similar term is used to describe the spirits of dead heroes, reinforcing the idea that the Rephaim had a spiritual or mythological dimension. The Bible records that the Ammonites called them Zamzummim, and the Moabites called them Emim, indicating they were widely known in different regions by different names. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 10 through 21. Although eventually wiped out by the Israelites and their allies, the existence of the Rephaim implies an ancient world inhabited by mighty races that now only remain in records and legends. Anakim. The Anakim were a tribe of giants descended from Anak who lived in the region of Canaan, particularly in Hebron, Debir, and the hill country. Joshua chapter 11, verses 21 through 22. They are first mentioned in Numbers chapter 13, verses 28 and 33, when the Israelite spies described the Anakim as giants who made them feel like grasshoppers. The word Anakim comes from the name Anak, who, according to Joshua chapter 15, verse 13, was the father of 3 giants, Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai. The Israelites were terrified of the Anakim due to their extraordinary stature and their reputation as formidable warriors. Some ancient and modern sources associate the Anakim with the Nephilim, suggesting they were remnants of the giant race from before the flood, though there is no explicit textual evidence beyond the spies' report. In Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 2, they are described as a people great and tall, of whom you have heard it said, Who can stand before the sons of Anak? This fear caused the first generation of Israelites to fail to enter the promised land. However, in Joshua chapter 11, verses 21 through 22, it is recounted that Joshua drove out the Anakim from the hill country, leaving only a few in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod, the very places that later produced Goliath, 1 Samuel chapter 17, who was likely their descendant. The Anakim symbolize the overwhelming power of the enemy in the Israelite narrative, but also serve as a symbol of faith's victory over fear through obedience to God. Zamzummim. The Zamzummim are one of the most mysterious giant tribes in the Bible, mentioned explicitly only once in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 20 through 21. They were the ancient inhabitants of the region of Ammon and are described as a people great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. The Ammonites called them Zamzummim, but the Bible identifies them as part of the giant group known as the Rephaim. The name Zamzummim itself sounds onomatopoeic, perhaps mimicking a sound or murmuring, and has no clear meaning in Hebrew, making their origins even more obscure. In the narrative of Deuteronomy, the Lord gave victory to the Ammonites to drive out the Zamzummim from that territory, just as he helped Israel against their enemies. Their existence indicates that giant races like the Rephaim and Anakim were not limited to the land of Canaan, but were also spread across other regions like Ammon and Moab, each with different local names. The fact that the Zamzummim are mentioned only briefly but are associated with extraordinary strength reinforces their image as mighty beings lost to time. In later Jewish tradition, the Zamzummim are often equated with the ancient races that were annihilated before the Israelite conquest. Although they are nearly forgotten in the Bible's grand narrative, the brief mention of the Zamzummim opens a window into an ancient world filled with giant races and great conflicts that preceded the history of the Israelite nation. Girgashites. The Girgashites were one of the 7 original Canaanite tribes mentioned as targets for Israelite conquest in Genesis chapter 15, verse 21, Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1, and Joshua chapter 24, verse 11. However, compared to other tribes like the Hittites, Amorites, or Jebusites, information about the Girgashites is extremely minimal, making them one of the most mysterious tribes in the Bible. There is no explicit record of a battle between Israel and this tribe, no famous king conquered city or detailed genealogy. Some scholars speculate that this tribe may have left the region of Canaan before the Israelite conquest, perhaps migrating to North Africa because their archaeological and narrative traces are so thin. Their name is believed to derive from the Hebrew root garish, meaning to drive out or to expel, possibly alluding to their fate of being driven out or choosing to leave early. In the Septuagint, the Greek Bible, their mention is sometimes omitted, suggesting that even by the time the Greek text was being compiled, their existence was already considered insignificant or unclear. Although they only appear in lists of tribes to be conquered, the presence of the Girgashites illustrates the ethnic and cultural diversity that filled Canaan before the arrival of Israel. Their obscurity only enhances their mysterious aura, and in Jewish and rabbinic literature, they are sometimes used as a symbol of nations that are lost to history, forgotten by man, but recorded by God. The Kenites. The Kenites were a small nomadic tribe that had a unique relationship with the nation of Israel, primarily through Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, who is called a priest of Midian, Exodus chapter 3, verse 1, and Judges chapter 1, verse 16. They were not part of the Israelite tribes, but were respected and accepted because of Jethro's role as a spiritual advisor to Moses and their loyalty to the God of Israel. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 19, they are listed as one of the original peoples of the promised land to be given to Abraham's descendants. However, instead of becoming enemies, they allied with Israel. In Judges chapter 4, verses 11 and 17, the woman Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite, killed Sisera, the enemy commander, by driving a tent peg through his head, a heroic act praised in the Song of Deborah. The Kenites are depicted as living separately from the Canaanites and often settling in arid or mountainous regions, such as the Negeb of Judah. They seem to have had expertise in metalworking consistent with the etymological connection of their name to the word Kayin, smith. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 6, Saul warned the Kenites to move away before he attacked the Amalekites as a sign of respect for their past kindness to Israel. Although not part of the Sinai covenant, the Kenites serve as an example of a non-Israelite people who lived in reverence of God and played a role in the salvation plan for his people. Their relationship reflects that kindness and loyalty can transcend ethnic boundaries in the biblical narrative. Emim. The Emim were one of the ancient giant tribes mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 10 through 11, described as a people great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. They formerly inhabited the region of Ar before the Moabites came and drove them out. The name Emim means the feared ones in Hebrew, reflecting their reputation as terrifying beings. The Bible identifies them as part of the larger group called the Rephaim, a race of giants that appears repeatedly in Hebrew Bible tradition. Although not much narrative information is given about the Emim, their existence serves as evidence that the regions surrounding the Promised Land, including the areas of Ammon and Moab, were also inhabited by these extraordinary beings. The Emim were the counterpart to the Zamzummim in the region of Ammon and the Anakim in Canaan, suggesting that the Rephaim may have consisted of various local branches known by different names to each nation. In the narrative of Deuteronomy, the story of the Moabites' conquest of the Emim is used to encourage the Israelites that just as God gave victory to other nations over these giants, so too would Israel be able to conquer its enemies. The Emim are not mentioned in direct battle narratives and seem to have been extinct before the arrival of Israel, but their mention provides a deep historical and mythological background about the ancient races that once inhabited the ancient Near East. Horites. The Horites, Hebrew Horim likely meaning cave dwellers or mountain people, were an ancient tribe that first inhabited the mountainous region of Seir, the area that later became the land belonging to the descendants of Esau the Edomites. They are mentioned in Genesis chapter 14 verse 6, Genesis chapter 36 verses 20 through 30, and Deuteronomy chapter 2 verses 12 and 22. The Horites are considered the original inhabitants of the region before being conquered and wiped out by the descendants of Esau in a pattern similar to what Israel did to the Canaanite tribes. Their existence is very obscure. There is no narrative of a major battle, a famous king, or complete genealogy explicitly described. They are mentioned as the ancestors of several local chiefs, such as Lotan, Shobal, and Zebeon, who later became part of Edomite social structure. Some scholars speculate that the Horites might be related to the Hurrian people of northern Mesopotamia based on phonetic similarities and geographical context, but this remains speculative. Their nickname as cave dwellers gives an impression of a primitive life or geographical isolation, reinforcing their character as a tribe associated with a past that has been swallowed by history. In the context of the biblical narrative, the expulsion of the Horites is used as proof that God gives territory to other nations besides Israel, such as Edom and Moab, in a legitimate manner. The Horites are a symbol of ancient inhabitants who no longer hold power, replaced by a nation chosen or permitted by God to occupy their land. The tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan was one of the 12 tribes of Israel, descended from Jacob's son by Bilhah, Genesis chapter 30, verse 6. Yet it is known as the most mysterious tribe because it is missing from the list of tribes in Revelation chapter 7, verses 4 through 8, which names the 144,000 sealed from the 12 tribes, but makes no mention of Dan at all. In Israelite history, the tribe of Dan has a controversial track record. They were initially allotted territory in southwestern Canaan, Joshua chapter 19, verses 40 through 48, but struggled to conquer it, then migrated north and captured the city of Laish, which they renamed Dan, Judges chapter 18. In this process, they also established a center of idolatry with Micah's graven image, a major violation of the law of Moses. This led the tribe of Dan to be frequently associated with idolatry and spiritual rebellion. Some early Jewish and Christian traditions even linked the tribe of Dan with the origin of the Antichrist, a view that, while not directly based in the Bible, reinforces the negative and mysterious aura surrounding them. The disappearance of Dan from the list in Revelation is considered by many interpreters to be a symbol of judgment for their past errors. While the Old Testament lists of tribes include Dan, its absence in end times prophecy makes it the only major Israelite tribe to be spiritually erased from the record of divine restoration, a warning about the dangers of apostasy and unfaithfulness to God. Magog, Meshech, and Tubal. Magog, Meshech, and Tubal are ancient nations mentioned in the list of Noah's descendants. Genesis chapter 10, verse 2, as the offspring of Japheth, yet they reappear prominently in the apocalyptic prophecies of Ezekiel chapters 38 through 39 and Revelation chapter 20, verse 8. In Ezekiel, Gog of the land of Magog leads a great coalition from the north, including Meshech and Tubal, to attack Israel in the end times, only to be spectacularly defeated by divine intervention. In Revelation, Gog and Magog represent the final global force manipulated by Satan after the millennium to rebel against God's people, only to be ultimately destroyed. Their geographical identity remains debated to this day, with some linking them to regions of southern Russia, Anatolia, Turkey, or the Caucasus based on Assyrian records and Greek history. These names appear to symbolize great enemies from the far north, a representation of uncertainty, brutal power, and a cosmic threat. Meshech and Tubal are also known from ancient records of the metal trade. Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 13, suggesting they were prosperous yet cruel nations. Gog and Magog are frequently used in Jewish and Christian apocalyptic literature as a symbol of the Antichrist force that will emerge before the final judgment. Their presence at the beginning of history as sons of Japheth and at the end of history in prophecy makes them unique. They frame human history from its post-flood beginnings to the final eschatological confrontation against God.